On this vote, the yeas are 308, the nays are up.
Mr. Bilbray. Mr. Bilbray votes no. Mr. Schuster. Mr. Schuster votes aye.
On this vote, the yeas are 309, the nays are 107, with one member voting present. The journal stands approved. House will be in order. Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pursuant to House Rule 186, I call up H.R. 471, the Scholarships for Opportunity and Results Act, and ask for its immediate consideration.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
Union Calendar Number 17, H.R. 471, a bill to reauthorize the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 186, the amendment recommended by the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, now printed in the bill, is adopted. The bill as amended is considered read. After 1 hour of debate on the bill as amended, it shall be in order to consider the further amendment printed in House Report 112-45 if offered by the gentlewoman from the District of Columbia, Ms. Norton, or her designee, which it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order, shall be considered as read, and shall be debatable for 40 minutes, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent. The gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 30 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks on H.R. 471 and include extraneous materials thereon.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a great pleasure for me to rise in strong support of H.R. 471, the Scholarship for Opportunity and Results Act. H.R. 471 is not new, but H.R. 471 is essential. It reauthorized and makes improvements in the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, which was created by Congress in 2003 to provide eligible low-income district parents with an opportunity to send their children to a private school of their choice. But it does more. It also provides an equal amount of money for chartered public schools, which are greater in the District of Columbia perhaps than anywhere else in the nation, and an equal amount for improving the public school system in the District of Columbia. Mr. Speaker, this act gives twice as much money to the 2 categories of public schools, conventional schools and chartered public schools, than it does to the scholarship program. However, the scholarship program is a focus of this bill, and it's a focus because this program has proven to be successful. In fact, 74% of all district residents, when polled, favor the continuation of this program as to these opportunity scholarships. Obviously, among those who have had opportunities they would not otherwise have, those who have gone on to college and enjoyed benefits because of their opportunity to seek education of their choice, it is 100% valuable. Mr. Speaker, we have pursued regular order on this bill. We have gone through both the subcommittee and the committee process. We have had extensive hearing, and we believe this bill is absolutely essential. I will mention that pursuant to the goals of the Republican House, we have made some austerity. Originally, this would have been $75 million. It is $15 million less because at this time, although we would like to do more, we have to make those kinds of trimmings that are possible. Still, Mr. Speaker, this is a jewel of the D.C. school system. It is an opportunity for people to have the kind of choice they have in few other areas. And I want to personally thank the Speaker of the House for bringing this piece of legislation and for all of his work through all of the years in which he worked so hard on the Education Committee to understand this program in a way that no other member does. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Maryland.
Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in strong opposition to H.R. 471. Let me be very clear. Public funds should support public education. But this bill, which would authorize $300 million to support education in the District of Columbia, includes an authorization for the expenditure of $100 million over 5 years to enable a tiny fraction of D.C. students to attend private schools. We've been told that the purpose of this bill is to help D.C. children get a better education. But House Republicans passed legislation earlier this year that slashes billions of dollars from educational programs across the country. In H.R. 1, which passed the House in February, House Republicans cut $5.7 billion from the Pell Grant program, $1 billion from Head Start, $757 million from federal supplemental educational opportunity grants, $694 million from Title I-A grants, and $100 million from the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. Under these Republican cuts, nearly 44,000 students from the District of Columbia could see their Pell Grants reduced. 700 would lose their Head Start placements. 500 could face reduced or eliminated after-school placements, and 2,500 would lose supplemental educational services. Remarkably now, after voting to leave so many behind, the Republican leadership wants to authorize $100 million in new spending just for private schools in the district as part of a $300 million authorization for education in that one district. And the majority does not even pay for any part of this $300 million bill. Let me be clear on this point. There is no offset for this bill. For that reason, H.R. 471 also appears to violate the legislative protocols issued by the majority with such fanfare at the beginning of this Congress. So all the rhetoric supposedly justifying massive cuts to education funding, all the talks about budget constraints, about tightening our belts, and about making sacrifices, all that goes out the window when the majority wants to give $100 million in taxpayer funds to private schools. Also problematic is that the D.C. voucher program has not resulted in better student achievement. The Institute for Education Sciences evaluated this program and found that in 2010 that there was no overall statistically significant impact on student achievement in reading or math. By comparison, reading and math test scores did improve among students enrolled in the district's public schools and its public charter schools from 2007 to 2010. The bill is also a direct assault on D.C. home rule. The Speaker did not consult with the district's representative or its elected officials before introducing the bill. Our committee did not receive testimony from the mayor of the district before we marked up this bill. And the Republicans have not introduced a national voucher bill because using taxpayer dollars to fund private schools is highly unpopular and has failed in every referendum placed on state ballots. Despite all of these arguments against the bill, to me the most significant problem is that it diverts funds away from educational programs that help all of the district's 70,000 students. Instead, the bill would use a lottery system to award vouchers to send about 1.3% of district students to private schools. I know there are members on the other side of the aisle who are truly concerned about the education of our nation's children, and they have a sincere desire to help students of the District of Columbia. But we should help all the students. We should provide high-quality education for all of them, and we should support continued improvement that raise all student achievement. I've said it over and over again. The greatest threat to our national security is the failure to properly educate every single one of our children, every one of them. We should not adopt a measure that spends $100 million so that about 1,000 students can go to private schools. And as a graduate of public schools and a longtime advocate of quality public education, as one who has sat on a charter school board, I agree with the President's statement of administration policy, which opposes creating or expanding a voucher program and asserts that the federal government should focus its attention and available resources on improving the quality of public schools for all students. Because this bill does not do that, I urge my colleagues to reject H.R. 471 in its current form. Mr. Speaker, later during this debate, my distinguished colleague, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who represents the District of Columbia, will offer an amendment to redirect funding for private schools to improve public education for all of the district students. This amendment is a thoughtful improvement, and I urge all members to support it. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Reserves his time. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's now my pleasure to recognize the committee chairman of the Committee on Education and Workforce for 5 minutes, if he shall consume. Mr. Klein.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of H.R. 471, this legislation that would reauthorize the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program. This program was created in 2004 with bipartisan support. This program has provided an educational lifeline and meaningful choices to thousands of district families. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. You know, everyone agrees now that our education system is broken. As we work to craft targeted reforms, we must support existing education programs that improve student achievement. The D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program is one such initiative with a proven track record of success. Over the past 7 years, this program has helped more than 3,000 low-income children receive a high-quality education at the private school of their choice. The Department of Education's own research confirms the program's success in increasing graduation rates to more than 90% in a low-income population of students previously trapped in underperforming schools. Additionally, this scholarship program has improved parental involvement in education. 4 consecutive studies have shown parents of program participants are more engaged in their children's education and more satisfied with their academic progress than parents of public school students. The evidence is clear, Mr. Speaker. This innovative program works and serves as a real alternative for parents who want to give their children the educational opportunities they never had. Yet despite this proof, the administration and some in Congress are determined to destroy this groundbreaking program. Without the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, thousands of parents will be denied an opportunity to make decisions about their children's education. Equally troubling, thousands of children will be denied the opportunity to achieve their full potential, leaving them unequipped to succeed in a 21st century workforce. We must put children first and stop a vocal minority from taking vital opportunities away from thousands of D.C. families. The program has received widespread support from Washington residents, including 3 former Democratic mayors, several members of the D.C. City Council, and thousands of students and parents. Congress cannot turn its back and deny students a chance for a better future. As our nation fights to get back on the path to prosperity, we cannot afford to eliminate critical educational opportunities that will prepare our nation's youth for tomorrow's workforce. All parents should be empowered to decide what school is best for their child. A quality education should not be a luxury available only to those who can afford it. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 5 minutes, distinguished gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from Maryland for his terrific help on all we have done on this bill. Let me count the ways. I strongly oppose H.R. 471 because it reestablished a program that failed to improve academic achievement as measured by standardized reading and math tests, because it infringes on the local government's right to make decisions about quintessentially local education matters, because it was introduced without so much as consultation with any elected official from the affected jurisdiction, the jurisdiction I represent, because it provides federal funds to send students to religious and other private schools despite the absence of support for vouchers as demonstrated by the failure of every state referendum to authorize vouchers, including 3 in California, and increases the deficit by $300 million, violating the majority's own cut-go for discretionary authorization legislative protocols. Although I am a proud graduate of the D.C. public schools and strongly support our public schools, especially given their great improvement, I have always supported public charter alternatives for those parents who are dissatisfied with our traditional public schools. Children can't wait until public schools, now in the throes of a race to the top, meet the top. I'm proud that the District of Columbia has the largest charter school system in the United States of America, with half of our children attending. Parents and organizations in the District of Columbia have made this alternative, not the Congress of the United States. The existence and the phenomenal growth of our public charter schools has fueled a competition that has actually helped our public schools improve. The reason is because the charter schools and the public schools, unlike the voucher schools, are competing for the same local dollar. So today, it is interesting to note that the National Assessment of Educational Progress found that the D.C. public schools has woken up to the competition and now is the only one of 18 large urban school systems that showed improvement in the 4th and 8th grade achievement tests over the past 2 years. Now contrast this with what the Bush Education Department found for the very voucher program we will be voting on in H.R. 471, and I'm quoting, the Department of Education found no conclusive evidence that the Opportunity Scholarship Program affected student achievement as measured by standardized reading and math tests. Yet the program was established precisely to measure and improve performance of the lowest achieving students in our schools. Charter schools, however, outperform the D.C. public schools and greatly outperform the charter schools. Our public charter schools at the middle and high school level, with a majority of economically disadvantaged students, scored almost twice as high as their D.C. public school counterparts in math and reading, and the graduation rates of charter school students is 24% higher than the graduation rate of our traditional public high schools and 8% higher than the national average. Yet these public charter schools have a higher percentage of African American students and of disadvantaged students than our public schools. They are entirely accountable. They can be closed, and like public schools, they have been closed. With this remarkable record, why in the world would anyone pick the District of Columbia to impose a voucher program on? Why target the only big school system that has set up an alternative public charter school system. If the majority were truly interested in our education agenda instead of their own, they would do what former Speaker Newt Gingrich did. When he approached me about private school vouchers, I told him of public opposition to vouchers in the city, but not to charter schools, as demonstrated by a fledgling charter school program in the district that had attracted few charters. But there was a District of Columbia law. He worked with me, not against me, to introduce a bill. Could I have another?
Grant the gentlelady an additional 1 minute.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
To introduce PL 104-134, which has helped us produce the large-scale, robust, alternative public school system that is now a model for the nation. The pattern of this Congress could not be clearer. They began by stripping the District of Columbia of its vote. They have done nothing but try to take from the District of Columbia with bill after bill. Now they want to help us against our will. We reject the insult of your help with the children of the District of Columbia. We are not second-class citizens. We are not children. If you want to help us, give us the courtesy, have the good grace to ask us how we want to be helped. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, as it says in the Constitution, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over the district. And that is what we are doing. It takes me great pleasure to recognize the gentleman from California, the whip of the House, Mr. McCarthy, for 5 minutes.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, I thank the distinguished chairman. As I listen to the debate, people want to know if anybody was asked. Do you realize that there are 4 times as many children who want a scholarship than there's one needed for? Those are the people we should ask. Those are the people who have been asked. Those are the people that have asked to be able to have a new life, a new direction, and a hope, what we all dream about in America. I will tell you this morning, like almost every morning when I'm in Washington, D.C., we get that time we call home. As a husband and a parent, I call my wife, and the first thing we talk about is our children. We talk about our children, about how they're feeling, how they're doing, but more importantly, how's their education, where the latest and where they're going. It's the same question that every single parent that's a member of this body asks. Every member of this body that's a parent doesn't care about what they will become. You care about what your children will become. And the greatest opportunity you have for your children to expand all the dreams and hopes they have as an American is making sure they have the right education. But it's not just for a few or select. We want to make sure everybody does. You know, last Congress, one of the most tough times I watched on this floor was the new Obama administration and Democratic majority, where they worked to terminate this program. They prevented new children from participating in going so far as revoking 216 new children for a scholarship that had already been elected to the 2009 and 2010 school year. Not only was unfair, it was unwise. We have an opportunity on this floor to do something different. We have an opportunity on this floor to actually make a correction. It's not a correction for you and me. It's a correction of a hope and a dream that a child can unleash and unshackle something that holds them back. It's a dream that they can rise to the occasion. They can have the foundation. They can have the ability that the country has always talked about. Well, that's why I support the SOAR Act, because I believe these children can soar higher. I believe these children can reach a new dream, and I do not believe in holding them back. For all those who sit there and still want more, 4 to every one, I, for one, is going to join with them, support this bill, and support a new hope and dream. That it's not about what we will become. It will be about what the next generation in America can achieve. And we want them to soar to new heights. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Maryland.
Yes, in regards to what was just stated by the gentleman, We care about all of these children, and it would be helpful if they were not, that $5.7 billion was not slashed from the Pell Grants when these kids get to college. It is my honor to grant to the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Losack, 1 minute.
Gentleman from Iowa is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for yielding. I wanted to come to the floor today to say that I think this debate is a distraction. I spent a lot of time visiting schools and talking with teachers and parents in my district, and this debate does nothing to address what they tell me they need. What they want is for us to work together to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act and to fix the things that we know are wrong with No Child Left Behind. If we care about improving education, we should be working to make our system more flexible and less punitive, which is something that both sides of the aisle agree needs to happen. I urge my colleagues to come together to work on the pressing education issues: America's decline in international education rankings, unacceptable dropout rates and achievement gaps, and the need to create a smart, innovative workforce prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. And I urge my colleagues to vote against this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, no one has worked harder on this than my subcommittee chairman, Mr. Gowdy. I yield him 3 minutes at this time.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the distinguished chairman of Oversight for his graciousness and leadership. Mr. Speaker, we have found consensus. Sweet, elusive consensus. We found it. Not in the final committee vote. That would be too much to ask. Not even in the testimony of the witnesses who came before the subcommittee. But we found consensus among the members themselves, one after the other, who testified as to the power and the magic of education to transform not just their lives, but generations of lives. I spoke with a distinguished member from the other side of the aisle, a gentleman that I happen to like and respect very much and is one of the most powerful speakers in this body. And I will not call his name because the conversation was not public, but he recalled for me the day that he was sworn in to office and how his father came to him with tears streaming down his face. And some of the tears were the tears that only a father can have who is delighting in the success of a child. But some of the tears were also the acknowledgement that it could have been the father and not the son, had the father not been born in the wrong town, at the wrong time, in the wrong state, and yes, in the eyes of our educational system of yesterday, the wrong race. It is that shared acknowledgement that education is the pathway to prosperity that makes me struggle with how someone can oppose this bill. The parents want it. They feel more vested. They feel like their children are safer. Mr. Speaker, you should have seen the parents that came and crossed political and cultural and racial lines to testify on behalf of this bill in the subcommittee. They want it desperately. The students want it. They feel safer. They feel like it's an educational environment that is conducive with their learning. Their test scores are higher. But even if they were not, their graduation rates are higher. And as a former prosecutor who cannot remember the last high school graduate that I prosecuted, the simple fact that they are graduated from high school in and of itself is enough of a reason to support this. Educational achievement is higher. Educational attainment is higher. The parents want the same choices for their kids that the President of the United States and indeed most of us who are members of Congress have for ours. Even the United States Department of Education once lauded this program as an example of something that works until someone or something told them to think otherwise. The residents of the District of Columbia, again, crossing racial political lines, overwhelmingly support this program. And the most insidious argument is also the most demonstrably false, that somehow this program takes dollars away from the three-sectored approach that the District of Columbia uses. The public schools will still be funded. The charter schools will still be funded. This just provides a third alternative, a third choice for parents who desperately want it and need it.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the gentleman an additional 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
One of the reasons the public approval for our body is sometimes so historically low is we have a tendency to demagogue those with whom we disagree, and we create false dichotomies. This bill is no more about the independence of the District of Columbia than anything else. The District of Columbia does not think twice before accepting federal dollars for the public school system, the charter school system, or a host of other agendas. Nor does the District of Columbia think twice when it accepts Pell Grant monies that allow an 18-year-old to go to Georgetown, which is a private school, but will not allow a 17-year-old to go to a private high school. Nor is this bill about whether or not someone believes in the public school system. I went to the public schools in South Carolina. My wife teaches in the public schools in South Carolina, and my son will graduate from the public schools in South Carolina, but I will miss his graduation. Like many of you have missed things in your lives because we will be in session. What I will not miss is the opportunity to throw a lifeline to kids who were born through the vicissitudes of life into poverty. We will give them the same choices and chances that we had.
Fired. Gentleman from Maryland.
Thank you very much. Speaker, it is not a false dichotomy when through H.R. 1, $1.8 billion are being slashed from the Head Start budget, causing 218,220 Head Start students to get a start. I now yield to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Danny Davis, Congressman Danny Davis, 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the gentleman from Maryland for yielding. I rise to join my colleagues in opposition to H.R. 471, the D.C. voucher bill. While I share the same commitment to improving the quality of education here in D.C., in Chicago, and throughout the nation, as a staunch supporter of public schools, I strongly disagree with vouchering public dollars to private schools and institutions. I do not believe that the D.C. public schools should become experimental labs for the rest of the nation. As I have stated previously on a number of occasions, paying for school vouchers translates into fewer taxpayer dollars for traditional public schools, which have the responsibility to educate all, and I emphasize all, of the children. Improving public education in the District of Columbia, as in the rest of the nation, has been and continues to be a long and arduous task. It is an absolute priority of mine. However, now is not the time to abandon our obligation to ensuring a top-notch public education for all students by shifting federal dollars to private schools. I understand and commend the federal government for playing a critical role in providing the district with badly needed funding for improving education since 2004. But I've never found any conclusive evidence that vouchers have increased achievement, nor have I seen any evidence in any study that an overall school district has improved as a result of vouchers. If the federal government is serious about improving the quality of education for the city's 70,000 plus deservingly young minds, then we should place our resources toward educational opportunities for all. And I must add that in the district we have seen improvement during the last 2 and 3 years. And while we didn't seek any real testimony from the officials of the District of Columbia, our school officials and students in public schools, we did hear from Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, whose thoughts represent the thinking of a large number of Washingtonians, and she has told us that continued investment in D.C.'s public school reform efforts will yield far greater benefits for the city as a whole, rather than spending millions of dollars on less than 2,000 students to attend private schools. I agree with Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, She represents the thinking and the people of the District of Columbia. I urge that we vote down this voucher bill and support the amendment that will be presented by Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, and I yield back the balance of my
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, it's a great honor to introduce the author of the bill, the Speaker of the House, for the customary 1 minute.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 1 minute.
Let me thank my colleague for yielding, and let me start by also thanking him and the members of the Government Reform Committee for their work on this bill. I also want to thank our 50 co-sponsors and all the members on both sides of the aisle who are standing with us today. I also appreciate the efforts of our colleagues in the Senate, particularly Senator Joe Lieberman, who are working on similar legislation. Today, the House will have the opportunity to do something special for the future of our country. And I think just about every member would agree that we've got to do everything we can to help our education system. Americans are concerned that their children won't be able to have the same blessings that they've had. And if we want to protect the American dream, there's no substitute for a quality education. You know, my view has always been that education reform starts with giving children a way out of our most underachieving public schools. Of course, that doesn't mean that we abandon those schools. It means we take some of the pressure off of them while they work to turn themselves around. So we came together here about 7 years ago and said, let's try something different. Instead of just throwing money at the problem, let's empower parents from lower-income families to choose the schools that are best for them. We wouldn't deny any school money that they'd already been receiving. We'd be injecting freedom and competition into a system that's caught up in the status quo. And we had a strong bipartisan coalition, including Anthony Williams, who was the mayor here at the time, Dick Armey, who for years led this fight in the House, paving the way for this program. He and I started working together on school choice in the early 90s when we served on the Education and Labor Committee together. We said, let's give the kids in our capital city a real chance at success and a real shot at the American dream that they don't have. And we thought to ourselves, what do we have to be afraid of? Well, as it turned out, there was nothing that we needed to be afraid of. Thousands of families have taken advantage of the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program. And there is strong evidence that it's both effective and cost-effective. And unfortunately, the education establishment in our country sees this Opportunity Scholarship Program as a threat. In reality, this is an opportunity to raise the bar, because competition makes everybody better. I think if you look beyond the talking points and focus on the facts, you'll find that the D.C. program provides a model that can work in other communities around our nation. Now, I think all of you know that this issue is important to me. But I'll tell you this is not about me. I'm proud to say that I've supported the Opportunity Scholarship Program from the get-go. But I'm even more proud of the fact that I had nothing to do with its success. For that, we can thank the students and parents who've become more than the program's beneficiaries. They are its greatest ambassadors. In recent days, I've received letters from many of them asking Congress to do the right thing, and I'll be submitting some of those for the record. You see, they know what it was like before. They remember living just blocks from great schools, but feeling miles away from them. And all they did was ask us to have a chance to have the same kind of education that kids down the street were getting. There's no controversial idea here. It's the American way. So if we're serious about bipartisan education reform, we should start by saving this successful bipartisan program that has helped so many underprivileged children here in D.C. get a chance at a quality education. And I urge the House to support and save this important program.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Mr. Speaker, most respectfully, and to our Speaker, I know his intentions are very good and honorable. And I want it to be clear on this side of the aisle, Mr. Speaker, that we care about every single child being educated and becoming all that God meant for them to be, too. And that's why we oppose the $1.08 billion that was cut from Head Start in H.R. 1, the $5.7 billion from the federal Pell Grant program. And with that, I grant to the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller, Chairman of the ranking member of the Ed and Workforce Committee, 3 minutes.
Gentleman from California is recognized for 3 minutes, without objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I thank him for his discussion of this legislation on the floor. And I rise in opposition to this legislation because I don't believe that we can afford to spend $100 million on a program that, in fact, in spite of what has been said on the other side, has been proven time and again to be ineffective and inefficient. Supporting our students, especially in poor and minority communities, is the right thing to do, and particularly in this economy, it's absolutely essential. But that is not what this bill does. If you really care about school reform, you'll want to help our students, our future. You do it in a sustainable and systematic way. You can't arbitrarily throw money at a small group of students and just hope against overwhelming evidence that your ideology somehow will work this time. You can't decide that only a handful of students deserve special attention. You can't ask Congress to vote for programs that the citizens of D.C. and the elected officials and the mayor have not asked for. You certainly can't decide to continue a program that does not help students succeed. There are a number of concerns about this bill. First and most importantly, the program does not help the students succeed. Just 2 weeks ago, the Republicans made harmful cuts in proven programs based upon purported standards of inefficiency, seeking to get rid of inefficient programs. If this is a standard, the D.C. voucher program fails the test. The D.C. voucher program does not increase student achievement or graduate students so they are prepared to go to college or careers. In fact, 4 Department of Education studies over both administrations found that the voucher program has had no effect on the academic achievement of the voucher students. These findings are consistent with other private school voucher programs in Milwaukee and Cleveland. Just yesterday, the state test results show that voucher students in Milwaukee's 20-year voucher program are actually performing similar or worse than other poor Milwaukee students. The study mandated by Congress about the D.C. voucher program says that very clearly that the use of vouchers had no statistical significant impact on the overall student achievement in math or reading. So what is the purpose of the expenditure of this money other than to prop up an inefficient, an ineffective, ideological point of view about how these students might learn? These students are not going to the schools that will change the outcomes. These students are not graduating with the set of skills that will allow them to succeed in college or career. But the fact of the matter is there are many public schools in the District of Columbia that are in fact achieving those goals, that are working for those parents, for those students. District of Columbia has open choice. Parents can go wherever. But we've simply decided to take this federal dollars and put it into a program because on the belief that it works in spite of all of the evidence that it's not working for these students. So why are we paying a premium of another $100 million in taxpayers' money to pursue this effort when it's on its face, it's not working? Yes, you've done telephone surveys of parents, and they said, I think I made a good choice. Okay? You do telephone surveys of the students. Are you any safer? The answer is no.
I yield the gentleman an additional minute and a half.
Gentleman is recognized for a minute and a half.
You ask the students, and they say, no, we don't feel any safer. A great deal is made about the choice of these parents. Is to be honored and to be respected. What about the choice of the parents of Head Start students that made a choice to put their children into Head Start in an effective program that makes a difference when they relieve that program on whether or not they are school ready, whether or not they're prepared to succeed at 4th grade and 8th grade and 10th grade, those critical points when a student decides to drop out of school. Those parents who are making the choice about effective education for their children, they get cut, 250,000 of them. But if you make an ineffective choice and it's consistent with an ideology, you get funded. That's just not the way we should do business here. And that's not the way to do business in terms of school reform. And that's not the way to help these children. And that's not the way to incentivize the other schools that are struggling to achieve better results, to achieve better success for their students. If you're going to say, we'll fund them, whether it's successful or not, we'll put $100 million into it because it comports with our view of the constellations. That's just the wrong way to proceed in this effort for these children and for other children who will follow them. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Burkle.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.R. 471, the Scholarship for Opportunity and Results Act, because today, as I stand here, not only as a member of Congress, but also as a mother of 6 children and a grandmother of 11 children, I know from personal experience the process that parents follow when they're choosing which school is the best choice for their children. Each child has different needs, different strengths, and as a parent reaches out to make that choice, we can realize that school choice is not cookie cutter. It should not and it must not be. And who better to make that decision than the parents of that child? Who knows best the needs of that student? Certainly not the government bureaucracy. The SOAR Act is about empowering parents to make the choice that's best for their own child. The Act is about giving them the freedom to pursue educational opportunities not available to them in failing public schools. The parents of the D.C. public school children deserve the same opportunities as members of Congress, Secretary of Education, and the President of the United States. Sadly, the parents of the children in the D.C. voucher program do not have the ability to pick up and move elsewhere for better public schools, and they can't afford private schools. The D.C. system needs substantial and sustained reform, but that reform process does not have to come at the expense of the children who live in the district. I stand here and I encourage my colleagues to support H.R. 471. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
I yield 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Bobby Scott.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, our public schools need more resources, not less. This bill diverts funds that could be used for public schools into private school vouchers. Instead of helping public schools, the bill helps the privileged few who can both win the lottery and have the resources to pay the difference between the voucher and the cost of an education. That cost of education is usually more than just the tuition charged, so the recipient not only has to cover the whole tuition, but also has to get access to a charity or religious institution which will subsidize the cost of the education. Many who win the voucher lottery find that they can't even use the voucher because they can't afford the remaining cost of education. And so we've heard a lot about the so-called choice of a private school education. That choice is only available to those who win the voucher lottery. So it's not a choice, it's a chance. And with that same logic, we could solve the Social Security problem by just selling lotto tickets. Those who win the lotto will be much better off. But of course, few will win. And likewise, 90% of those who seek a voucher will lose the voucher lottery, and so they don't have a choice. Even though they have chosen a lottery, they don't have the choice. They will remain in public schools, and those schools will be worse because the money has been diverted. The evidence now shows that even those who win the lottery may not be better off. Studies of the D.C. voucher program reveal that there's virtually no improvement in education. And furthermore, those the program was supposed to help aren't the ones that are benefiting. Those in failing schools represent a small portion of those who use vouchers. And many of those who use vouchers were already in private schools, and many more would have gone to private schools anyway. The schools that these children attend with vouchers are not covered by the same educational accountability standards as public schools, and the students and employees are not covered by the same civil rights protections. So we should defeat this bill and channel these funds into the public schools in Washington, D.C. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, sometimes you just hear something, it's hard to believe. We're wasting money here in Washington. The American people are hearing it first here today. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to place today's Washington Post article in that is entitled, "White House Ignores Evidence to How D.C. School Vouchers Work."
Without objection.
Thank you. I now yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Arizona, Dr. Gosar.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our children are being let down. Our education system is no longer the world's best. In the District of Columbia, they are facing an education crisis like none other in our country. According to some experts, the D.C. public schools spend over $20,000 per year on each and every student. Despite this, D.C. students perform the worst when compared to all 50 states. One study found that only 13% of 8th graders in the D.C. public schools were proficient in reading. This must change. You may be wondering why is Congress focusing on just the D.C. schools today. That is because the D.C.'s public schools are unique in that they are under the Constitution. Congress has the sole responsibility to govern over the District of Columbia. With that in mind, it is our responsibility to ensure that we no longer allow these students to slip through the cracks. That is why I'm urging my colleagues to support H.R. 471, the SOAR Act. This bill allows low-income D.C. students a scholarship to attend school of the parents' choice. 74% of parents in the D.C. support this plan because it has achieved real results. While I believe education is the best decided on the local level, Congress is constitutionally obligated to fund D.C. students and their education. That is why we must give parents the choice as to where their children will attend school. We can't afford to continue to ignore these students. They deserve a chance to attend better schools that achieve greater results. Today we have a golden opportunity to make D.C. public schools better. Today we have an opportunity to help students in the lowest achieving school district in the country. Today we can give D.C. students the opportunity to succeed and pursue their dreams. Join me in supporting H.R. 471. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, we yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Hawaii, Ms. Arona.
Gentlelady from Hawaii is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong opposition to this bill to extend the failed private school voucher program in Washington, D.C. In this time of budget strife and cutbacks for public school districts all across the country, this is the wrong time to take federal money away from public schools and give it to private schools. When I evaluate education or any other policy, I want to see the research on what works. Despite claims that the D.C. voucher system would improve the academic achievement of D.C. students, multiple congressionally mandated Department of Education studies have concluded that the program has not improved these students' academic achievement in reading or math. Further, the studies found the voucher program to have had no effect on student satisfaction, engagement, motivation, or students' feelings of security. The studies found no significant impact on students' career aspirations, participation, homework completion, readiness for fun, or tardiness. Students with special education needs, English language learners, and gifted students in the voucher program were less likely to have access to key services than their peers in public schools. Despite receiving public money under the D.C. voucher program, these private schools do not take all students. In addition, teachers at these private schools are not subject to the same certification requirements as D.C. public schools. This bill also makes an exception to the majority's own budget rules, which require that all legislation proposing new funding must slash funding from somewhere else. This bill adds $300 million to the deficit without any such offsets. These kinds of exceptions make a mockery of their own rules, particularly when there is little evidence to support the underlying bill itself. I understand that many voucher supporters are disappointed with the quality of our public schools. This says to me that there is common ground for members from both sides of the aisle to improve our public schools. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Gentleman from California.
At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Arizona, Mr. Flake, for his comments.
Gentleman from Arizona is recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. You know, this is a fascinating discussion we're having here. A gentleman who spoke a while ago said that because this is a lottery and not every one of the children who wants in this program can get in the program, that it represents not a choice but a chance. I can tell you, a lot of these kids will settle for a chance. I mean, give them a chance. Give them a choice, chance, whatever. Just give them the opportunity, however slim it might be. And the fact that they only have a chance and not all of them can get in the program speaks about the demand for the program. Speaks about how many people actually need it and value it and want it. And we ought to expand it further and give more individuals a chance. You know, I live in an area where there are pretty good schools, pretty good public schools. My children, I have 5 of them, have either been in the public schools or are currently in the public schools. Those public schools are better because of the competition around them. We have a robust charter school program in Arizona. There are lots of them around. There are many choices for kids to have. The public schools my kids attend are better for it. And the same will hold true in D.C. as well. If you want to improve the public schools where children typically attend, and most children attend, then offer a choice and a chance. Competition and accountability does that. It does it all across the economy. It does it in every other phase of our lives. Why we say it won't happen in public education is just beyond me. So I commend those who have put this bill forward. I wholeheartedly support it. I was involved several years ago in crafting the original one, and I'm very pleased to support this today, and this will be good for all kids. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Maryland.
Speaker, may I inquire how much time is left on both sides?
The gentleman from Maryland has 4.5 minutes remaining, and the gentleman from California has 10.5 minutes remaining.
I grant the gentleman, I yield to the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Payne, 2 minutes.
Gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with great excitement. My Republican colleagues have made a vow to offset new spending, but they found a cause worthy enough to bypass this promise. My Republican colleagues have rallied behind the SOAR Act, a $300 million bill without an offset. Reportedly, the goal of the bill is to give all students a shot to win the future by restoring hope and building stronger public schools. This is truly encouraging as it matches my goal as well as those of many of my Democratic colleagues. However, I strongly disagree with the proposed solution. The $300 million bill will continue the D.C. Opportunity Scholarship Program, which was ineffective. Department of Education reports show the voucher program have no statistic significant impact on overall student achievement, aspiration for the future, frequency of doing homework, or attendance or tardiness rates. Further, although built on the premise of choice, vouchers schools can and do reject students based on prior academic achievement, economic background, English language ability, or disciplinary history, which significantly limits choice. This $300 million program, which is proven ineffective, is not the solution for the intended goal. To reach this goal, we can begin by repealing the H.R. 1 cuts to programs that remove barriers for low-income students, such as Title I programs, Head Start, and TRIO programs. I urge my colleagues, truly invested in the goal, to reject these cuts to key education programs and oppose the SOAR Act. And earlier I heard one of the persons on the other side talk about persons who supported vouchers in D.C. Most of the political persons who supported either were defeated, have left, and have no more say. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
You know, Mr. Speaker, we've heard a lot of talk, and it seems like most of the talk seems to be about how we're being unfair to the District of Columbia by giving them money that, in fact, they don't really need. Let me just be candid. The District of Columbia gets all the other federal money that the states get in other cities. This is additional money. But here's the amazing fact. Depending upon whose figures you use, each student in the District of Columbia, they spend between $17,000 and $28,000 per student. Cato says $28,000. We'll take the district at $17,000. These opportunity scholarships go between $7,500 and $12,000. More importantly, each student, and I'll agree that perhaps some of those students would have gone to a parochial or private school otherwise, but for those who leave the public school to take advantage of this scholarship, they leave all $28,000 behind, and they leave with $7,500 in opportunity, and some parent who cares enough to find a way to make up the rest if there's additional cost. Many of the parochial schools mentioned that are high school equivalents of Georgetown, except they're not getting Pell Grants, they're getting this grant, in fact, take this as the entire payment. So the truth is, this is a gift to the District of Columbia in several ways, and I want it understood here today, because this is important enough for the children to have an opportunity to opt out of the 51st when you look at the ranking of all the states, if District of Columbia was a state, it'd be 51st. If you rank it against the top 50 inner cities, it's still only at like 22nd. It is a failed school system with the second highest amount, by their own figures, per capita spent on students. And if you take Cato's figures, they're far and away the most expensive school anywhere in the country, public school. So, Mr. Speaker, we've had a lot of talk about how Republicans are cruel because we're funding less than the Democrats would like, and we're actually funding less on this program than they would have. The difference is they were simply handing $75 million a year for the next 5 years, or at least for this year, to the public schools with no strings attached. Well, in fact, we're breaking it into 3 pots of $20 million in order to allow the public school to get something, which the Speaker in this bill believes strongly they should get something, so they're net better off. Another $20 million so that children can go to chartered schools. And let's understand something. If you go to the public school, they say you have choice, but the regular public schools have districts, boundaries. You can't exceed them. Going to a chartered school gives you an opportunity to cross town for the school of your choice. And the last 20, a mere $20,000 out of hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact, goes to these few lottery winners. And a gentleman on the other side of the aisle, rightfully so, said it's a lottery. But let me, as a former businessman, and I don't call recovering businessman because I hope to never forget the lessons I learned in business. If you came to the state of California and said, we'll give you, whether it was $60 million or $600 million, but you got to take a small amount of that and put it out for lotteries, and you ask the voters in California would they take it, you'd get the same 74, 80% absolute approval. If it was absolutely new money, they would. But if you went to a businessman, if you went to somebody who had to understand how to make a dollar go further, there's no question what you would find is let's do the math. I spend between $17,000 and $28,000 on each student. $7,500 in expanding these opportunity scholarships, if they were to use their own in-district money, for every time they hand out $7,500, they would relieve themselves of over $17,000. It means that every student who remained would have more dollars. The fact is, it's a self-inflicted wound.
for the District of Columbia not just to take all of this money, but to take additional money, because every student who exits is an opportunity to have more for those who stay. But that's not the way public education thinks. It thinks in terms of how much do I get per student, how many union teachers do I make sure I employ, how much union dues do I get. I'm sorry, but that's not the way the rest of America thinks. It's not the way the Speaker thinks when he crafted a bill that was incredibly fair to the District of Columbia and fair to many of the students who, yes, have an opportunity to get these few scholarships. And God help us, I just wish there were more, because they wish there were more, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from Maryland.